All right, so we're going to start with value proposition. So I'm curious, just kind of a quick poll, how many of you are doing a services company? Like you're doing services versus product, okay. So the rest of you doing product. How many of you don't know what you're doing yet? You don't know whether it's a service or product? Okay, no one's raising their hand, so either I've intimidated people or it's not. So value proposition works whether you're a services company or a product company. And one of the things we want to cover about positioning today is really the concept here of how do you position your service or product in somebody's mind that makes it memorable for them to remember what you do. So if you anticipate raising capital at all, one of the challenges you run into is most of the time what you will do is you will meet with a junior associate at a firm whose career at that firm is based on their ability to rightly articulate your idea to their boss. So Javier comes to me and says, "Hey, Dave, did you see any interesting deals this week?" And my answer is, we've met, we've talked, but you're smart and I can't explain your idea, and my future at the venture capital firm is based on my ability to not look like a dumbass in front of my boss. Right? And there's times where people walk out of the room, they're like, "Oh, that meeting went great." And I'm like, I don't think so. Like, I'm a little suspect. So one of the things you have to do is you have to make your message super concise. And the way you do that is you fail a lot and you go do 25 customer interviews in a month. And you're like, we iterate. Every time I do a customer interview, I'm like, oh, that question didn't resonate with somebody. Or, oh, that question really did. Oh, that really got them. They understood exactly what I was doing super fast. So part of what you're doing in all these customer interviews is you're just going out and testing your message, testing your message, testing your message. And if they have this like blurred vision thing, it probably means not landing great. And one of my mentors told me one time, you have to choose if you want to be right or if you want to be effective. And you only get one, by the way. You don't get to be both. So I'm like, well, I like to be both. And he's like, you get one. So I've chosen to be effective. So if my message doesn't land, I want to know like, I wonder why that message didn't land. And I'm going to change my message for the next time. And by the way, when you're out pitching, because just personal pitching for all the companies that I've raised money for, I've definitely pitched more than 200 VCs. And I don't think any pitch was the same. So I would come out of a meeting with David and it'd be like, that's really interesting. I'm going to use what I learned from David and test it with Sid. And sometimes the answer was, that totally landed. And sometimes the answer was, I apparently didn't know what David was talking about because I tried it on Sid and he had this quizzical look like, what the hell are you saying? So you can't be over your skis too much, but the value proposition has to both land, which is why I push you guys to do, let me go backwards, why I push you all to do a structure. Because if you can do the structure first, it gets us into a conversation. And what you're really after in that conversation is have the conversation first. So you want to get into a dialogue rather than a pitch presentation. Because if I'm asking you questions, I'm engaged. If you're just rolling through your slides, the answer may be thinking about, I got a bicycle ride I got to train for, I'm thinking about, gosh, it's really sunny outside. But if I'm in conversation with you, I'm engaged. So you need to make sure that we have, that's why there's a forcing function of structure. Okay? All right. The components of positioning are what's the place in the mind, who is that initial customer, and I would identify them down to this specific person, role, what's the target customer look like, the ideal customer profile. And what you're after with that is, if you pick one and you find out you're wrong, so who was it saying they did a bunch of customer interviews and they found out the market was broader, right? The answer is awesome, right? So you basically, you're going in with a hypothesis, but if you start with everybody first, then I hear, oh, you haven't talked to anybody. You don't actually know who your customer is. Because what you're saying is everybody's my customer. I'm like, nope. But if you're like women 30 to 50 who have this role, I'm like, you know your market. Now you may go do 16 more customer interviews and go totally not in the market, right? But that's okay. It's like you pivoted and learned and you continue to make improvements on what your pitch is. But I'd rather you pick one and be wrong than pick everybody and miss everything. It shows at least you've gone and done some of the research. And then what claim or promise are you going to make? So what is it about the product, the value proposition, And by the way, faster and cheaper is not a value proposition. We're faster and cheaper than somebody else. Ugh, there's a race to the bottom. There's nothing that investors want to hear about the fact that you're faster or cheaper. I want to know that you're the premium price point, you can drive sustainable margins, that people love your product, your net promoter score is incredibly high. But if you're like, we're faster or cheaper than somebody else, I'm like, nauseous, eyes rolling in head, it's not good, okay? By the way, all these slides are available to you as you'll get an email with all the stuff. So here's what I'm going to ask you to spend about 5 minutes on right now. Just make some bullet points on what makes your product or service different. Why should people buy from you? If you were to write a tagline today for your website, what would the tagline be? And what's the claim and promise? So just take about 5 minutes, jot down some notes to yourself. If this exercise is incredibly tough, congratulations. Being concise is always hard. Talking for hours about topics you love is super easy. So take about 5 minutes right now. We're going to just jot down some of these notes. All right. So product-wise, for those of you who are doing services, hang with me for a minute as we talk about product. I'm going to give you some mechanics to go through over the next 30 days to help you define your product offering and give you the mechanics of doing an MVP and how to do an MVP and how to prioritize down to how to write a spec. So I've got 4 blog posts for you that basically breaks it down. And like a lot of the topics we're going to cover every month, I unpack a lot of things that are kind of common concepts that people get confused, right? So your product vision is important, but one of the things you need to remember as you launch is this is your XY axis, right? You're here at launch. At scale, all of us as founders, we see the future as if it's real. That's part of our delusion. It's part of what makes us good founders. But we have to go backwards to unpack what we go from scale to actual launch. And then we have to prioritize what those features are. Because when you're a founder, a friend of mine used to say, you're under everything. You're undercapitalized, you're under time constraints, you're under-resourced, you don't have enough people. There's more stuff than you have time to do in the day. So consequently, you have a maximum amount of constraints. Given the fact that you have so much in constraints, you have to prioritize what it is you're going to do. So we did office hours today. Anybody do office hours today? Yeah, awesome. So some of you don't need to incorporate yet. It feels like you're moving the business ahead, but you're not. It's like buying office products. Like I went to Staples, I checked something off my list. No, you have a lot of constraints right now. So it's good that you have a product vision. You should keep the product vision, but unpack it backwards to what do I have to do this week today? So the other thing is to start to really focus around the problem you're solving, not the product you're shipping. Because here's what will happen, and it happens typically more so for the engineers in the room, is I end up with a product that's looking for a problem. So I had a Japanese investment partner that came to me at one point, and they're like, we've been working on this double secret product, and we want you to help us launch it into the US because we don't understand the market. And basically we're a product, and we're like, do you have a problem? Will this work for your problem? Do you have a problem for this? And it was like literally a product looking for a problem to solve, which is just super painful. And I have one of those meetings next week with somebody who's like, we built a platform. So anytime somebody comes to you and says, we built a platform, what I hear, and Javier hears is, oh, so you spent a lot of time building something and you don't have any idea who's going to use it or what they're going to pay you for it. So, because that's a platform. Now, at a mature state, you can be a platform like Microsoft with thousands of customers. But when you have no customers, when you say you have a platform, it is a sign of run away for the investor. It just means you don't know, okay? So you need to know what the product is. You're going to come across this concept called a minimum viable product with heavy emphasis on the word viable. So when you think about what is it you need to ship to get the customer to understand what you're doing, what is the components that make it viable? The minimum number of features you can ship. So for those of you who heard last month, you heard me talk about, I'm actually doing this while I'm working with you guys. So I'm doing customer interviews, I'm working on a product. So my minimum viable product was my wireframe. I'll show you what it was I went out to people and said, I'm building this. And I would sit down over a cup of coffee with somebody and say, this is what I'm building. And I would get their head to go, oh yeah, that would be really cool. Oh, would you pay for that? oh yeah, if you did this, I would pay for it. Oh, really cool. Now, this was my wireframe. So I have a designer friend. I went to him and said, that's kind of what I'm looking for, right? He mocked something up. We drew it up in pencil on a whiteboard. He turned it into something. We put numbers in them. By the way, if you looked at it very closely, they're super close to lorem ipsum numbers. For those of you who don't know web, lorem ipsum text is just this text that fills pages. And if you dig around on the new site and you click on the privacy policy, you will find lorem ipsum text there, because it's live and the MVP is up. But there's the terms of service is lorem ipsum, and the privacy policy is totally lorem ipsum. All right, so this was my wireframe. So that wireframe got built into a MVP that went live yesterday. And I was still formatting stuff before I came to see you guys tonight. And so the point is the thing that I'm trying to prove with this is, can I get companies that are at the revenue stage of startups to give me 6 months worth of what they could view as proprietary data? I think they'll give it to me, but I don't know, right? And people are like, oh, you could go do this, and oh, you could go do that. And I'm like, none of that other shit matters. If they won't give me the data, then it doesn't matter what else they do. So, and we looked for about 60 days trying to find a free solution, and we tried. Spent about $1,000 on a team in Peru, and I threw that software away. So I finally just paid a guy locally who's a great designer. And he's like, it doesn't have much design. I'm like, I don't care. I don't need I'm not trying to prove the design. Like, I don't want it to suck, right? I don't want you to get to it and be like, oh, Dave used crayons, right? That would be bad, because you wouldn't give me a second chance. But I want it to be enough design that when you look at it, you're like, oh, that's kind of interesting, and oh, the value proposition's there, right? So if you so don't do it now, but if you want to look at it later and you want to go to, so it's Lumeric, so think numeric with an L. And you will see basically my hypothesis on my value proposition based on 50 or 100 customer interviews, right? So body copy, headline, tabs, all that content except for the lorem ipsum text, which I'm not a lawyer, so I don't have my privacy policy written yet. But the question was, I just wanted to ship it. But now I can get out and say, oh, this works for you. Can you go give me your data? So go to lumeric.com and type in this information and set up your account and do the profile. Now, it looks and feels like a live site, and it is live, and I am capturing data. But it's kind of like a Universal Studios. You guys been to Universal? And you walk around the side of the building, and you're like, oh, the building's only this wide. Well, that's exactly what my MVP is, right? From the front, it looks like a building, but from the side, it looks like mostly 2x8s, because it is mostly 2x8s. So, and my point is for you all, as you look at your MVP and this month and what are you going to ship, the answer is don't ship everything. Just ship the one thing you want to prove. And that may be different for all of you, right? But the one thing I wanted to prove was, would somebody give me the data or not? Can I test price points or not? Can I A/B test landing pages or not? And some of you, we talked earlier, if you're B2B, you're going to have to go find people outbound to go interview. But if you're business to consumer, I could send you all the way through a B2C shopping process as if you were buying something that was real, and then give you a 404 arrow at the end that says, sorry, I can't take your credit card. Now, I want to know that you're ready to hit the credit card button to test the price point, but I'm going to give you an error message or, hey, thanks, sign up for the beta, we'll ship you something when we're ready. I want to know how far through the commitment process I can get you. So the thing you need to figure out is, what's that one thing you really want to test. So that's my quick MVP experience. It's literally real time. So here's some wireframing things for those of you building products. And if, by the way, as a resource, somebody asked me, hey, I think you have a typo. You can edit me at any point, and if you have other resources, like somebody gave a website last month that had all the social listings, I'm like totally integrated that. If you have other resources that you like, feel free to post them on the Slack channel, and I'll totally integrate it. Happy to give credit where it's due. These are just 3 tools you can use to go do wireframing. The thing that you're going to do with this as one of your tasks for this next month, especially if you're building product, is you're going to take one of these tools, you're going to mock up what you want the features to be for your site. And by the way, registration pages don't count. You need a registration page? Yes. Do you need to show me that in your demo? No. Right? And then we do confirmation email. You're like, that was a super hard feature. No, don't show me registration pages or confirmation emails. Like, please, don't hurt yourself. You're going to take one of these tools and you're going to post a job on a company called Fiverr, Fiverr, and you're going to ask somebody to do a PowerPoint or Keynote version as if you have a product. And that's going to become your equivalent of this. And you're going to go out and talk with Brett, and you're going to be like, here's my new product, arrow, 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 as if it's a next button, next button, next button. And Brett's going to go, or, hey, that's pretty cool. So, but you're going to use the wireframing tools to communicate to the designer what you want to do, and then you're going to post the job on Fiverr, and probably for somewhere between $50 and $200, you're going to get a PowerPoint or Keynote version of what your first version of your MVP is going to look like. So the cheapest I've ever done it for is about a working version, but keep in mind I've done this a few times, $480. Like, I need a product that does, here's the screenshots, here's what I need to connect, here's what I need it to do. Post the job, 16 people will bid on the job. You'll pick one. I usually end up picking two because I know I'm going to throw one of them away just so you don't get stuck, right? So it's like, so occasionally I'll overspend, but it's, it's $800. So I overspend by $400, but I end up with two working prototypes, two different designs. And now I have something I can show somebody. So now I can go out in my target audience and say, here's my new product, arrow, arrow, what do you think? And someone will be like, that's really cool, or nah, this is a feature I'd like. And what you're doing through that whole process is you're really defining and working down and prioritizing what's the feature you need to ship next. And if you have a choice, once you have those things up, you can ask the customers the question, hey, I'm thinking about these next 3 features. How would you rank them for me? I'll be like, oh, that one's definitely that one, right? So what you're after is use that for someone so you can get it out of your head and in front of somebody where you can actually get real feedback, okay? So wireframing tools, super useful, even for the non-artists, because I'm not much past a crayon, by the way. It's not good. All right, business model canvas. How many of you have done a business model canvas before or heard of it? Okay, about 50%. Okay, so you're gonna go to LeanStack. I sent this out in the Slack channel today. You're gonna go to LeanStack and you're gonna create a new project. The new project on LeanStack looks like this. So it walks you through, and you're only going to do the first 3 sessions. We're going to do 1, 2, and 5. Sorry to jump ahead, but the point of this one is you're going to go back and say, here are my customers. And you type in, my customer segments look like this. Here are my customers. Here's my ideal customer profile. They're IT managers. They're consumers. They're men. They're women. They're people in this geography. Who is your customer segment? And you're going to define who that person is. Then you're going to come over here and you're going to type out, what problem am I solving? If you're doing gaming, you're like, I solve the problem of boredom and I let people have fun. Great, that's totally fine. And then the unique value proposition is the topic that I want you to focus in on between now and next month. As we go forward, you'll use this as the tool to talk to the mentors. And we'll continue to fill this out. The nice thing about the LeanStack tool is every time you change it, it keeps version control. And you can share it with other people, your co-founders, and say, hey, I have this version. Hey, Brett, what do you think about? And Brett can weigh in and add comments. And you can, the more you do customer interviews, the more you're like, no, that didn't really land. Or, hey, I think, our competitive advantage is this. So every version of the Numeric site, there's 9 versions of this same document. My starting hypothesis, my next hypothesis, my feedback from others' hypothesis, and every time you get a version, you're just going to do a version control of it. So it saves it automatically. It's free, super cheap. Next month, we're going to talk about revenue streams. So that's going to be one of your deliverables. But it's set up so that you can share it with the mentors. It's set up so you can share it with your co-founders. And then you're continuing to fill out the other segments. Okay? And again, we'll use this as the mechanic that we use to communicate with the mentors going forward. I'm not going to have you do it now. I'm going to have you do it later. I'm going to spend some more time on cost to build here and a couple other topics. So, but that's the business model canvas. Philip Osterwald did the original version. There's a book called Business Model Canvas. There's a book called Value Proposition. Osterwald's great. So this version I think is just a little easier from the standpoint of at a mature, if you're doing this as an academic exercise, all 9 boxes matter. if you're doing this to see what I'm going to do next month, start with these 3. Just 1, 2, and 5. The academic process is useful, but it's sometimes frustrating because you're like, I don't know my cost structure. I don't know my key metrics. The answer is, don't worry about that yet. We'll get to them as we go. Questions about the business model canvas? Generally get the ideas? Yeah?
What are the numbers?
Just the order that you would normally fill it out.
Okay.
Yep. So, yeah, good question. So, and we'll spend time on revenue streams next month. Okay? So, register, fill that out. And if you decide you really are interested in the book, Osterwalder's book is great. And he's definitely a thought leader in this space, and he was a great advisor for us in Startup Weekend. All right. The next thing I want to talk about a little bit is get you in the mindset of how many engineers in the room? You're like, I'm going to code this up. Okay. All right. So there's a number of costs there's 3 cost categories you need to think about for any business, not just for the engineers. There's the cost of building something, which is if you're a technical co-founder, you're like, I can code this up. So there's not really any cost to build it. Okay, so we'll work on that later. The next cost is the cost of selling something. And the final cost is the reasonable or exceptional profit that drives investors to care about your idea. So those are the 3 significant costs associated with doing this startup. So the engineers think about it as the cost of building, which is awesome. In the next 2 months, I'm going to help you blow away your ideas of cost of selling. How much does it cost me to sell the product? And then what's the reasonable to exceptional profit that we as investors want to see as a return that will get us to cut loose of our checkbook and write you a check? So, and by the way, exceptional is better, right? Reasonable, not so good. Like you can get friends and family to do that one, but it makes Thanksgiving super awkward. So you want to focus on these are your cost structures. So what you're going to do from that perspective is you're going to write a specification. So it starts with what we started to talk about your wireframes, and I'm going to break these mechanics down for you so you can actually walk through this mechanics in a super detailed way. So if you're a service company, sorry, this is going to be super geeky on product for a minute, but the discipline is there as well. So your requirements document is really what are the specifications that you want to write about? What is it that it needs to do? So ultimately, my wireframe has to, when a company gives me data, I need to generate a report that looks like this. Now, do I need to generate the report today before I have 100 companies in the data set? Not really. I can give them a message that says, hey, thanks for giving me your data. And as soon as I have 100 companies that look like yours, I will give you the report. Will they be disappointed? Yes. Will I do it anyway? Yes. Because their alternative is nothing. So if somebody's going to come to your site and right now their alternative is nothing, the answer is you just warn them and say, we're currently building a data set of 100 companies that look like yours. As soon as we have that, we'll send you the information. Great. Right? So as long as you manage expectations, it's okay. Will some people be disappointed anyway? Yes. Do some people show up at this event looking for free office hours without attending the event? Yes. Did they read the stuff? No. And those people will always exist. Right? So don't worry about them. Worry about getting more people on your list that you can go, this is my idea, this is what I'm working on. You're going to go through a design and flow process. So the reason I encourage you to do it on PowerPoint or Keynote is you have to think about what slide comes next. Like what's the next thing in the process flow? And that's what you want to focus on from that perspective. And then you're going to use the design version that you did with Fiverr to test that out. And you're like, the sequence is wrong here. Like I need to get this slide up here, and I need to move these things around a little bit. So from a mechanics standpoint, and again, this will be posted, and these are all links. I've written 4 blog posts that go step by step through all of these pieces. So launching a product, writing a spec, picking a vendor, doing contracts, and monitoring the progress of the vendors. So, and again, this can be a vendor, so you can use Upwork, you can use Fiverr. There's a bunch of vendors who you can post this job. So the mechanics, I've literally gone line by line on the mechanics. So to give you an example of that, when you post the job, you post the first meeting of that job and you pay everybody to attend. So one of the ways that you do this is you give them a document. This is what I'm looking for you to do. You invite 3 vendors to come and participate. You walk through the information with the outcome of that being everyone who attends this meeting is going to get paid for the meeting time. I want you, all 3 vendors, to write out your notes of this meeting and give me your action items. Because what you're after is, can they rein you in to help, can they help manage you through this process, right? And 2 of the people are going to give you awesome notes and awesome tasks, and they're going to ask great questions. You're like, I have my top 2, because somebody else is like, yeah, I got paid my $25 to sit in on this meeting. And you're like, you're gonna pay all 3 of them $25. And really they're just taking meeting notes, and you're trying to figure out whether they can wrangle you and manage you through the process. So now you have 2 vendors. So you can give them a spec, and now you can say, now with the spec and the information you've asked me, give me a proposal to do the first version of the product. And then you're gonna have competitive bids. So now you have a choice of, is that in my price point or not? So is it going to be your commercial code you're going to ship later? Oh, hell no. You're going to throw this away. But if you have a working prototype, you're way ahead before you spend hundreds of hours working on something that customers may not care about. So what you're after is, in the next 30 days, you're going to write these pieces, and you're going to figure out how much it's going to cost me to build a product if I don't ship it, or if I don't build it myself. Because you have other stuff you need to work on in the next 30 days. Just saying. So those are your MVP mechanics. Yes, sir?
So what if there are some folks in the room who have already built a pretty highly functional prototype?
Yep.
Should they go back and do this work?
I would go back and look at, as you look at prioritizing your next feature set, I would spend time on that. And then I would use that as a way to inform, again, you're going to do more customer development interviews in the next month. So if you already have a product and you're thinking about, well, we know on our product roadmap, these are the next 3 features we're going to ship, I would make that a hypothesis instead. And I would say, okay, I have something to show today. I have 3 features I want to test. I want to go out and show my product and say, hey, we're thinking about, on our product roadmap, here's what's next. Rank them for me. And use those customer development interviews to inform your decisions about doing that. And for those of you who weren't here last month, one of the tasks is set up a Gmail or set up a MailChimp account. And every customer interview you do, if they're really qualified, if they're not a qualified prospect for you, do not ask this, because you don't want people on your list who don't qualify. But if they're really a target customer profile, you can say, hey, Sid, is it okay if I put you on my email updates for the company? Most people will say yes. And every month you're going to send out a note. Dear Sid, MailChimp's great, comma, this is what we shipped this month, feature, feature, feature. This is what we're going to ship next month, feature, feature. This is where I could use your help. And you're going to build this list from 0 to 5 to 15 to 50 to 200. Because right now, if you had a list of 200 people who could be your ideal customer profile, you'd be like, I am so happy. I have a list of 200 plus people who are my ideal customer profile. But you don't have that. So what you're going to do is you're going to use all the customer interviews to go build that. And then if you send it to them regularly on a monthly basis, 2 weeks at this point, too much. 2 months, I will forget about you. But monthly, you can send me an email. And what you're going to get is some subset, probably 10% of that list, is going to say, hey, I really like that. Hey, you should do this. Hey, have you thought about that? And those folks are going to inform your decisions, but instead of having to meet with them one-on-one, they're going to inform your decisions about what feature you're going to ship next month and the following month and the following month. Some of them will end up being your biggest fans. So just think about that from a session perspective of what you're really after. Okay. Those are the blogs and content that I want to walk you through. If you're doing a services business, the thing you're really after is what's your differentiation, and what are the things that people are going to remember about you and talk about you. So this is where our crowd diverges a bit. So the product people are like, huh? But the services folks are like, what's the thing that makes it memorable? So when Katie and I were at Startup Weekend, when we started there, our Net Promoter Score, anybody familiar with Net Promoter Score? So basically 0 to 100. So, and if you're a 7, you're kind of negative. If an 8 and 9 are positives and 10 are amazing fans. And what you're after is, how do I get an amazing fan? So if you're in a service business, the question is, how do you differentiate yourself from everybody else who does what you do? And the question is what's that memorable moment? What's that thing that's different? What's the thing that has people go, oh, I was at this place the other day and they did this? Are you giving somebody something to talk about? Because if you're not likely to be memorable. So look around your industry, look around from outside of your industry, look around for opportunities to impress and amaze. And think about it from the standpoint of, hey, what's the thing that shows up about, anybody ever register for a restaurant and they say, is this a special occasion? And you say, yes, it's my anniversary. And you get there and they're like, crickets? And you're like, way to set an expectation and disappoint. Right? And by the way, the bar's not super high. Right? Like a card on the table, it's not super high. But then to ask and not do anything is like bad. So if you're in the service business, the question is, okay, how do you create a memorable customer experience that will allow people to refer you to somebody else? Because what you're after is word of mouth referrals. The ones that drive me nuts are, especially the Amazon one, hey, you got a product shipped from Amazon.com and it landed 3 hours ago. Give us your customer feedback. And I'm like, I haven't even opened the freaking box yet.
Right.
How can I give you customer feedback? So you need to think about it in context of timing and what is a reasonable ask. Is it reasonable for me to ask you to send this to 5 friends before you've used it for an hour? No. But if you've used it for a week and you've engaged with it, is it reasonable for me to say, hey, can I give you a promo code that you could pass along to your friends? If you loved our service, pass it along to your friends. If you have any questions, tell us. Is that something that's surprise and delight? So if you're in a service business, the challenge there is you really have to figure out what it is, where your timing and opportunities are that are relevant to your customers that get them to think about you versus everybody else. And services businesses, by the way, are great businesses. They're just harder to make money when you sleep. So investors index around stuff that scales without people. So you'll find we tend to lean in this program around product or product as a service. So if you're not familiar with that model, the idea of product as a service is we start with a service, but then we're introducing tools and technology to drive the costs out of the business. So that's the way you scale a services company. Okay, so yeah.
How do you think about, or how should you think about a service that's enabled by a technology? So I think about like Uber. Is Uber a product or is Uber a service? And where do they put their...
So Uber as a technology is a product, which is a marketplace that connects two folks. So, and we'll by the way, go into this kind of in detail next month as we talk about revenue models. But so, and at scale, they have a number of different revenue models. Where they have credit card transaction fees, they have referral fees they get for sending drivers to get cars. But at launch, excuse me, at launch, the thing they did really, really well was I could see the car and how close it was, and I knew how long it was going to take to get there. So in essence, what I did was I created an app that was a marketplace. So the product was the marketplace and the app. Ultimately, somebody else is delivering the service. And what's interesting about it is I had a chance to visit the Uber Elevate conference. For those of you who've been here, you heard me talk about it a little bit. Uber Elevate's their flying car program that they're trying to launch in the next 4 to 5 years. So Uber has looked at that entire ecosystem, sorry, I know that drives some people crazy. I say ecosystem, and I don't know why. They have looked at the entire ecosystem and looked at, okay, we make the software that allows to schedule these eVTOLs, right, flying cars. And then they're taking everything else that's super risky and super expensive, like the manufacturing of the aircraft, and dishing it off to other people who are like, we'll go make flying vehicles. And I'm like, that's the worst part of the market. Like the best part of the market is the software that schedules things and routes stuff and takes all the payments and transactions. So what Uber has done effectively is they've looked at it and said, if we were to take this and make it apply to aircraft, what's the most profitable pieces, and then what's the least profitable? We're gonna take all the least profitable pieces and give it to our partners. And it's like, okay, that's brilliant, because you've taken the whole model and said, the most money in this market looks like this. We're gonna take the best. That's what my grandfather used to do with watermelon. He would eat the center out of it, right, where all the sweet is, and I'm like, that's bad, right? So what Uber effectively has done is they've taken the center out of it, right? They've taken the most profitable pieces.
Okay, if you put vodka back in.
If you put vodka back in, that would work. Yeah, good thinking. I think I was underage. That would be probably a problem. So my point being is if you think about where does this start, and when you look at all the transactions that come before, or what I would call upstream, and after what you call downstream, where are the most profitable pieces in the transaction, and where should you play? So used to be the distribution world for Microsoft, where my first startup was, we did software distribution of online licenses. Well, that was a horrible place in the marketplace to be because there were no margins left. And what we did was we made it super transparent so people knew what products they should be buying, which in essence negatively impacted our ability to keep margins high. So it was always good for Microsoft. It was never really good for us. So the company went from 0 to 32 million in sales in 4 years. But then Microsoft decided they wanted to take their biggest competitors with Ingram and Tech Data, which did $13 and $15 billion respectively, and told them they should do what we were doing. Right? So that's the bad part about dancing with a gorilla is you're not through till they are. So, lessons learned as you go, right? So, but think about upstream and downstream, because what you may find as you focus on the problem is you may say the market's the right market, our product's not the right product, and we want to move up market or down market because it's more profitable. So you'll find that in the process. So you were going to ask. Okay. All right, so those are MVP mechanics, a little bit on software. So I want to just open it up for some MVP discussion. Like what are you thinking about for your MVPs at this point? And if you want to, it benefits everybody to have the discussion in front of everybody. So if you have MVP topics you want to talk about now, we'll do that for a few minutes, and then we will wrap up here in a little bit. MVP topics? Yeah?
Landing page, is that for a service? Is that a reasonable MVP?
Landing page for a service can be a reasonable MVP if you're trying to figure out how you find customers. So again, back to the 3 cost centers. There's a cost of building or delivering the service, that's one cost. There's a cost of acquiring customers. So, and you'll hear me talk about it as CAC, so customer acquisition cost. The key variable in the next 2 months you'll learn a lot about LTV to CAC ratio, which is lifetime value to CAC ratio, cost of customer acquisition. And it applies in a service business or a product business, both. So even if you're running a restaurant, the question is how much does it cost me to get somebody to come to my restaurant, and then how much will they pay, and what's their lifetime value? So in the case of, let's think of the ones I should use. Trinity is not necessarily relevant today ones. So at Classmates.com, when I was on the board at Classmates before we sold it, we sold an annual subscription. We had one SKU, it was $88 a year. So we knew that our lifetime value was 3.5 years. So somebody can do math in your head, you get the math. So how much should I spend on customer acquisition cost in order to capture that lifetime value? So we basically had dialed in on an ad spend basis because it was business to consumer. So we knew we could spend up to $88 to acquire a customer because we would have that customer for 2.5, 3 years. So I have another business that I'm on the board of that we will spend our entire first years of revenue because our lifetime value right now is running 7.5 years. So our recurring revenue associated with that customer says we can spend up to, now we don't spend that on every customer acquisition, but we know that some channels are more expensive than other channels. And we'll get into this in the next 2 months about marketing and sales as well. But the idea there is you want to figure out as quickly as you can, how much does it cost you to acquire the traffic? Of the traffic, how many people will register for whatever the value proposition test is? And then how many, if you're a service company, how many people will say, I will give you my email address? So the challenge with services is you don't want email addresses from somebody who's in Tel Aviv, because I can't use your service, I'm geographically constrained. So the question is, how do you get them to say, here's my email address and here's my zip code? So and then you can filter traffic to relevant customers to right profile. But all of those things has a customer acquisition cost. So here's the math that investors love. If I can come back and say, if I gave you $10,000 this month, today, to invest in customer acquisition, how many days would it take you to give me return on investment for that $10,000? Most of you, the answer is, no idea, right? But when you can say it's 37 days, the answer is, oh, tell me more. Because if you can do 10,000, then 100,000 is going to be really interesting. right? 47 days, 74 days. What is it? And in the next couple months, we'll spend a fair chunk of time on that. But you have to know the answer to that question. Right now, in the next few months, you just need to have a hypothesis, right? So it's kind of an informed decision. You're like, I think it's going to cost us this, right? So that'll give you a start. Whether it's product or service, both of them are relevant, for sure. Other MVP thoughts or general questions? Yeah.
The Bloster founder, he went and talked about an EVP because there was no way that he was going to be actually able to do an MVP. Can you address anything about?
Yeah, so Rand and I have talked about this. We called it a kick-ass product instead of a minimum viable product at some point. So the problem with there's been a lot of overemphasis on minimum versus viable, which is the problem, which is I can ship something that's shitty and it's okay, and if I wait till it's good to ship it, then I probably waited too long. And the answer is probably a little truth to that. So the idea, though, is if you really know what the customer wants, right, then you can spend more time building a kick-ass product. That's the ideal. So one of the things you'll hear me talk about over and over again, so Glenn Kelman, who's CEO of Redfin, and I were in a panel one time, and I'm like, listen, you just got to ship something. Glenn's like, yeah, you got to ship something beautiful. And I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, well, if it's beautiful, people will give you a second shot because they're going to hit something and it's going to break. And I'm like, yeah, Glenn's right. You gotta ship something that's beautiful, right? Because you can't look like it was done with crayons or your kids did it. And Glenn's probably one of the most competitive dudes I know. But when they go test stuff, right, they test stuff that looks finished. So you don't always have that latitude, but I do find that if you have something that doesn't look, if it looks like it was thrown together, it looks like, when the engineers do the design, that's a problem, right? Because it's kind of like when somebody builds a house and they're like, we haven't put up wallboard and art because the plumbing, it's amazing. Like you need to see how elegant the plumbing is. That's what every engineer thinks of their code. So the fact that you would put up wallboard and art and make it pretty and give it Pantone colors, it's like, so you don't let them do that to you if you're the business person. It's not pretty. So the best way to do it is have a kick-ass product, but in the meantime, you gotta ship it and get it out there. That's why I did the static version first, by the way, because I could sit down and have a conversation and say, yeah, don't worry about the little details on that one. I don't want people to auger in on that. I wanted them to get the concept and go, yeah, I'd do that. Or, nah. But the one-page layout was a designer, a half day, a whiteboard session, and him mocking something up for me for a few $100s, where somebody's like, oh, I get it. So for a few $100, I'm able to go, I literally showed it to probably 80, 90, 100 people. But I'm like, I want to get feedback, right? And the feedback was like, yeah, I like it. So trending the right way. So, other questions? Right. Mentors, Javier, all, thanks for coming, being here. Your deliverables for next month. So August 8th is the next session. Thank you for enduring my geekiness about revenue and business models. So your deliverables for month 3, again, this will be in your email tomorrow. You're going to do value propositions. You're going to work on your value propositions. You're going to do your product feature benefits with ranking and details. So in essence, you're starting to build your product roadmap. What are we going to ship? What are we shipping first? What's the critical things to ship? What are the things that can wait for later? You're going to start to fill out the business model canvas, first 3 sections. You're going to use Fiverr as your first version to do a Keynote or PowerPoint version to work through your workflows. You can do the wireframing tools first. And you're going to continue to do more customer development interviews. So customer development interviews are the most important thing. If you get to next month's review with the mentors, I would rather have you say, we did 20 interviews and we didn't quite finish the MVP yet. Great, because the 20 customer interviews is going to inform what you ship on the MVP. Okay? All right, so this will be out in email. It's on the website. The slides are on the website. The video will be up as soon as Jake sends it to me. The books for this month, a whole set of things there for you. Anything by Alex Alsterwalder is great. I would encourage you to think about this stuff like a couple people talked to me about my reading schedule of books. It's weird. So for those of you new, my goal is 100 books a year. So, but it also means I don't do other stuff that some of you do. Like I don't really watch Mariners games. That hasn't always been a bad thing. This year it looks like it may be, like I could miss something this year.
I would
But
suggest audiobooks for some of the.
audio works too. Audio is
all,
awesome.
All the books you suggested are free in the library.
That's true. So you can get on, it was Goodreads, but what's the new version of the app?
Libby.
Libby?
Libby.
Libby. So if you want to do the King County Library version of Audible, there's a new app called Libby, which used to be, what was it, Overdrive?
Yeah.
So much more friendly version, and you basically sign up for the library and you can get books for free. So
I should have mentioned that because I'm number one on one of them.
there you go. I find 1.5x speed is generally okay. 1.75 makes people sound kind of angry. Just so you know. Like if you do a book and you didn't read it, just make sure the person doesn't sound angry at 1.75 because I'm on a book right now. I don't like to listen to it because it sounds like he's angry. So bunch of books, great resources. Spend time doing the deliverables. You can get to the books as you go. There are great resources. Happy to point them out for you. But other than that, enjoy. Thanks for being here in July. It's awesome. So.